We spent some time today talking about the Prime Minister still refusing to call for a public inquiry into the allegations uncovered by the Globe and Mail in a story co-authored by our next guest, Robert Fife, who is the Ottawa bureau chief at the Globe, which talks with more detail, I think, than we have ever seen or heard before on exactly what the Chinese, or some Chinese, were doing here to try to affect the outcome of the 2021 federal election. Robert Fife is on the line. Mr. Fife, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
I was going to use, I'm kind of cautiously using the word allege, although the leaks that you managed to get from CSIS, these are not allegations. These seem to be things the government was aware of, at least some people in that government. Is that the case?
Yes, the government would be aware of that because the CSIS documents were distributed to officials in major departments, including the Privy Council office, which reports directly to the Prime Minister. And some of this information about Chinese foreign interference operations were also shared with Canada's 5 allies, which is the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, and as well as the German and French spy services got to see some of these documents as well, because all these countries are in the same predicament where there is an effort by China to try to interfere in their democracies, and so that's why they're all sort of cooperate and share information.
Can you at least outline to some degree, just a little bit, some of the actual methods used by China to change the results of those elections and what their ultimate motive was?
Well, in the 2021 election, according to the CSIS documents reviewed, the consulate in Vancouver and Toronto, where those cities have large mainland Chinese Canadian communities. And so Chinese diplomats in the consulates, as well as proxies in various Chinese Canadian community groups, were enlisted to try to elect the Liberals and to defeat Conservatives judged to be unfriendly to China's interest. Now, they didn't want a Liberal majority. They weren't all that happy with the Liberal government either, but they felt it was the best alternative compared to the other parties. They wanted to have a minority government, and they liked the fact that in minority parliaments everybody's fighting all the time, and that suited China's purposes. But specifically, some of the things that they were doing were cash donations, under-the-table, undeclared cash donations, having friendly companies hire international students studying here in Canada and paying them to work as volunteers on preferred candidates' campaigns. There were also anybody who made a contribution who was judged to be friendly. They would make up the difference after they got their tax receipt back from the government. And another really important issue that China used was disinformation campaigns in the friendly Chinese language media outlets, but also on social media on WeChat app platform, which is run out of China. So these were areas where they tried to influence people to vote for a Liberal candidate and to defeat Conservative candidates. And in one of the briefing reports we saw, the Consul General in Vancouver was actually bragging about the fact that they defeated 2 Conservative MPs, and they were particularly wanted to defeat Kenny Chiu, who was defeated in the 2020 election campaign. Mr. Chiu had been very critical of China's crackdown on Hong Kong. He himself had immigrated from Canada from Hong Kong, and he'd also put forward a private member's bill which would have set up a foreign registry, which is very similar to what the United States and Australia have. And what that means is that former politicians or lawyers or lobbyists would have to register that they are working on behalf of the Chinese government, which right now we don't know if people are doing that. So you might have some former premier or former politician on TV giving a more or less sympathetic view of China, but without us knowing that they're actually being paid to do so.
And what was the situation specifically with this Toronto area Liberal MP Han Dong?
I have to be very clear here is that Global News has reported that CSIS officials went to the Prime Minister's office and asked them to rescind the nomination in 2019. The Prime Minister said that's false, and he's correct in that because CSIS would never ask a government to rescind a nomination. They would issue a warning, and they would not go directly to the Prime Minister's office. They did, however, and this is correct, they did talk to Liberal Party officials, just raising a warning that Han Dong, in their estimation, was too close to the Toronto consulate, and that they should be aware of that. And Mr. Dong has issued a statement, and the Prime Minister has completely defended Mr. Dong, said he's an exemplary member of Parliament, and Mr. Tong has said that he is willing to testify before a parliamentary committee which is studying Chinese interference to defend his name.
I want to just try to follow up on something I started this with, Robert, and that's the idea that up until now, the Prime Minister has said, no, there's no need for a public inquiry. He was asked again about it today and gave some long-winded roundabout answer about, there's already, hearings going on. It's not necessary. What I found unusual here, you'd expect the opposition to, of course, ask for this, but there are members of Justin Trudeau's own party, including his advisor, Gerald Butts, suggesting this is necessary. So what do you think is going on here?
Well, when you have people like Dick Fadden, who was the former CSIS director and the former national security advisor to Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Harper, and the former chief electoral officer, Jean-Pierre Kingsley, who these are two highly regarded, nonpartisan former bureaucrats who believe that there needs to be a public inquiry into Chinese interference because what is at stake here is Canadians have to be able to be assured that the Chinese interference is not having an effect on election campaigns. Now, Mr. Trudeau says it did not affect the outcome of of the 2019 and 2021 elections, which is true. The Liberals had won more seats, but even if it was to result in the defeat of two or one or three members of Parliament or candidates, that's wrong. In fact, Aaron O'Toole, a former Conservative leader who in the 2021 election believes that Chinese interference activities cost the party up to 9 seats. So, we can't have any foreign state interfering in our election campaigns, whether it's China, Russia, or, some American right-wing pact that's sending money up here. Canadians' elections are for Canadians to vote on and not to be interfered with by particularly by hostile states.
I would ask, as we run out of time here, what you think will happen. How long can the Prime Minister put off this idea of a public inquiry with so many people, including the ones you just mentioned, pushing for this to be done for what seem like pretty obvious security reasons?
There's got to be an inquiry.
Yeah, I agree. There has to be an inquiry, and the parliamentary committee is not the place for an inquiry because it gets bogged down in partisanship, but also they can't see these secret documents. And that's crucial. If you had a judge can see the documents, can go in secret, look at the unredacted documents, be able to listen behind closed doors on testimony from CSIS officers about counterintelligence operations, and be able to come out and issue a report, which obviously some of the stuff would not be publicly available. We would have faith that an independent person who was a judge held an inquiry. A lot of it could be public, but some of it obviously couldn't, and then come out and tell Canadians what has happened, how extensive it was, what did the Prime Minister know, and what we should do, what should be done to make sure this doesn't happen in the next election campaign.
And do you think that's going to happen?
Well, he doesn't want it to happen, the Prime Minister. Part of the reason is, I guess, according to the Conservatives, seems to make some sense, is that, they're the ones who benefited from the Chinese interference operations.
Which would be enough reason perhaps not to want to have a public inquiry. All right, Mr. Fife, want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.
Robert Fife, the Ottawa Bureau Chief now, former CTV journalist, of course.
Doing amazing work.
Yeah, great story, and I'm sure there's much more to come.